everybody. This is Racer Nate, also known as David. So first off, I want to say the idea that started this commentary was I was on Netflix and I watched this movie called Remembrance. If you guys haven't seen Remembrance, I would recommend that when you're done with this video, you go check it out on Netflix. It's a 2011 film about the Holocaust, and it's kind of like a love story. But it's really, really sad and really happy at the same time. It's just a really, really good movie, and it's really moving. So I just wanted to say that first off. But so after I watched this movie, I went on a spree of watching other Holocaust-related things on Netflix. Now, the Holocaust it's probably the worst thing that's ever happened in history, as far as I'm concerned. I can't even express in words how terrible it is. And it's one of those things that we all know about it, and we've all learned about it in school at least a little bit, or have seen some movie about it. Schindler's List is another really good movie for people that don't know a whole lot about the Holocaust or exactly what happened. Watch that movie, and it'll kind of give you an introduction to it, and it's a really, really moving movie. But it's something we all know about, but we rarely talk about because the last concentration camp was liberated 71 years ago, right? So my grandfather was pretty young at the time. My dad wasn't born for another 14 years, and then my dad lived out until he was pretty old. Like, he was like in his 30s, and then he had me. So it's very far off from nowadays, right? But it's one of those things where a lot of people don't talk about it just because it's not something people want to talk about. It's terrible to even think about. No one wants to really sit down and have a conversation about the Holocaust. But it's one of those things where I know it'll never be forgotten, right? Because it's such a big deal. The Nazi war machine was such a big deal, and they caused so much suffering to so many people, not just Jewish people, but there was a study that came out about 2 years ago that I was reading online the other day, and it said they estimate that the Holocaust alone killed roughly 20 million people. So we all know about 6 million of those were Jews, but all the other ones were just there was Soviet prisoners of war, that was a few million. There was Slavs and Gypsies, Roma, homosexuals, people that are mentally or physically disabled, just old people in general, a lot of Polish civilians, really civilians from all the countries they took over, and anyone that politically or otherwise went against the Nazis was killed or used for slave labor and then died. But the thing about the Jews is not as many of them were used for slave labor as the other groups of people, because most of them, well, not most of them, but a large part of them were just, women and kids and old people and sick people, so they couldn't be used for slave labor. So a lot of times when they get to the camps, they would just right away just march them to the gas chambers or just shoot them and just kill them outright right away. And that's if they survived the journey. A lot of them died when they were rounded up or on the train rides or were beaten to death or whatever. I mean, there's countless ways that the people in the Holocaust, specifically the Jews, were killed. And I don't know what it is that fascinates me about it, because it's one of those things where I want to read about it just because I want to educate myself. It's like probably the single most largest event in history that's like had such a huge impact, right? Like, they completely tried to wipe out an entire race, and they almost succeeded. I mean, overall, I forget. I think it's overall they killed like 65% of the Jews in Europe, and in some countries like Germany, Austria, and Poland, it was like 90%. So they almost succeeded, right? If they would have gone for another 5 years on the same path they were on without, getting pushed back on all the fronts and eventually getting beaten out by the Russians and the Americans and the British, if they would have kept going and they would have not had any opposition, I'd say probably 5 more years, all the Jews would have been dead. The only surviving Jews would be like in the far reaches of Asia, if there are any, or in the U.S. or Canada, like places where the Nazis hadn't reached. But pretty much the majority of the Jews would all be dead, like the vast majority, like more than there were. So real quick, so the fact that no one talks about it nowadays kind of bothers me, but I mean, I guess I understand because it is so far off. It's an important piece of history, but it doesn't necessarily affect everyone today. Like many of the Holocaust survivors went on to have kids, and their kids had kids, and now their kids are my age, and their kids are ready to have kids, right? So that's like 3 or 4 generations. So for a while, it doesn't directly impact us nowadays. So nowadays we focus on more things, right? Like people that are being massacred today. So that's what I want to use as a quick example. So when the Holocaust was going on, not a whole lot of people knew about it. A vast majority of the people in Europe, in Germany, didn't know about it. They knew Jews were getting taken and deported, but most of them didn't even know they were getting killed. So especially in the U.S., all the way across in the U.S., most of us didn't know. A lot of people didn't know about the Holocaust at all until the death camps were liberated at the end of the war. And that only shows a fraction of what was going on, because most of the time when the camps were liberated, the furnaces or the crematoriums were already destroyed. A lot of the buildings were burned down or bowled over and buried. Most of the bodies were disposed of, cremated, buried. They even had farmers plant crops over the graves. So really, when they got there, and there would be a few thousand prisoners left in some of the camps, they would have an idea of what it was like, but not even close to what it was actually like when things were going on, like in their prime, right? When the death camps were the most active. So they only got a little taste of what it was really like. And not just the death camps, but the death marches. I'm sure you guys have heard about death marches. It's where they would be moving prisoners from one place to another. A lot of times this happened at the end of the war when they were retreating and they were closing down camps. They would round up everyone. Sometimes they would right off just shoot the people that were too weak or too old to go. And then they would all start marching for miles and miles and miles to train stations or another location. And a lot of times it was in the snow. I read a book. I forget what it was called, but it was in middle school, and it was about this kid that was a Holocaust survivor, and it was about him and his dad and what happened to them on the death march, and in general when they were in the Holocaust, in the camps and stuff. So they would just march people, and if anyone fell down or collapsed, they would shoot them, and then by the time they finally get to the next place, they'd be like thousands of people shorter, right? So it was an effective way, I guess, to move people and then also cut down on their number of prisoners and ensure you only have the strong left, or the strongest. But real quick, I want to go back to modern day. So a huge event that was covered throughout the entire world. So this is what I'm trying to talk about. The Holocaust killed roughly 20 million people, and a lot of people didn't even know about it. But nowadays in Paris, we had ISIS do an attack, and they killed like 100, I forget the number, 130 something people. But I'm going to, just for this instance, I'm going to round it to 100 people. So say that they killed 100 people. And that caused huge uprising. It really affected all of us, and it was a terrible event, and it got worldwide coverage for days. And a lot of us are still talking about it. It's a current event, it's a really big deal, and it's made a lot of us want to take revenge and fight ISIS. But those 100 people, say that happened every single day. Every single day that you woke up, another 100 innocent people were rounded up and shot or killed. They were just murdered, right? And we hear about it every day. And if this happened every single day, it would happen for, I've done some math here, 548 years straight. Every day for 548 years. To equal the number of people that were killed in the Holocaust in, 6 or 7 short years. 548 years. That's crazy to think about. That's unreal. That's from the 1500s. No, before the 1500s, the 1400s until now. Every single day, 100 innocent people were shot. And that would be the number of people that were killed in the Holocaust. So I know that's kind of hard to even wrap your mind around, because just think about that. Like every piece of history, way before. What year did Columbus come over to the U.S.? It was 1492, 1493. I don't know. I've heard two different rhymes, so I think it's 1492. So maybe even a little bit before then, until now, every day 100 people would be executed. Like before the formation of our country before before North America was even discovered by Europeans. Every day 100 people are killed, and that would equal the number of people that were killed in the Holocaust. And I'm saying, like, if it went on for another 5 years, I don't even know. Like, the only reason why it slowed down, the killing slowed down, was because they were starting to lose the actual war. So they had to try to focus to save their, to win the war instead of just wiping out the Germans or the Jewish people. But yeah, guys, so I don't know. I just want to talk about that a little bit. I guess the basic message I want to put out is don't be afraid to learn about the Holocaust, right? It was a terrible thing, and it's really sad, and I know not a lot of people like reading about it or hearing about it or looking at pictures of it. But I highly encourage everyone out there that's watching this to just learn something about it, right? Or if anything, go to like the Holocaust Museum or one of those websites and find the stories of one of the individual survivors and just learn about that person. Just put a face to it, right? Because 6 million people, we can say 6 million, we can say 20 million, we can say 8 million people all day, and it doesn't really affect us. Now, if you were standing out in a field and a big open field, imagine this, miles wide, miles long, and every one of those 20 million people was just standing there in formation in like one big, not in a line, but like one big group. Like, how far would that stretch? How many people would that be? If you had to shake everyone's hand, how long would that take, right? Or if every person walked up to you, you shook their hand, and you smiled at them, they smiled at you, and then the next person came. Like, how far do you think you would make it before just stopping? I mean, 20 million people, that's, I don't know. It's hard to even think about. But I just encourage you guys to educate yourselves. I mean, just learn about it. I know we're not going to forget it, right? But there's going to become a time, if it hasn't already, where the Holocaust doesn't apply to us, right? It's so far away that we don't even think about it. And I just encourage you guys, if anything, to just think about it, right? I don't know, just don't forget them. I don't know. That's my little message to you guys. And if anything, go watch that movie on Netflix. It's called Remembrance. It's really, really good, and you won't regret watching it. It's really good. All right, thank you guys. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.